Welcome to the first episode of the Live It Loud podcast, video podcast if you're watching this, but regular podcast if you're just listening. This is something I've been dreaming up for a long time. If you don't know me, hi, my name is Maya. I am a 22-year-old wife and mom. I am very vocal on politics, on my faith, online. I've been dreaming up this podcast for a really long time. I've really been in prayer about it and dreaming about it and just asking the Lord what he wants me to use all my platforms for, and I think this is something that's been a long time coming. So I'm very happy to be starting this episode. I have my laptop just because I've taken some notes and I can really ramble, so I want to make sure that we're, staying on key for everything I wanted to talk about today. So I'm going to be talking on this podcast all things culture, politics, faith, marriage, and motherhood. So today's episode, it's going to be very special because it's our first episode. I'm going to kind of share my story with you guys and talk about why it's important for you to use your voice, especially in a culture that tells you to stay silent about your beliefs, and how your influence can shift the atmosphere in certain spaces. If you don't know this about me, I'm 22 years old. I've been on social media now for I want to say almost 5 years, and I just love it. I love sharing my faith. I love meeting people online who are like-minded. I love having convincing conversations and debates with people. That is something I've always kind of had a passion for. And I remember before I started social media, I wasn't very outspoken about my beliefs at all, other than my Christian faith. I was pretty outspoken about that just in my personal life, but online I wasn't very vocal about it at all. I was just your average girl. I still am your average girl, but I just wasn't posting online. And so I remember I had just become voting age, or I was just about to be voting age. I think I was 17 during the 2020 election. And I remember I was talking to my dad about social media and how frustrated I was that I felt like there wasn't a lot of representation of conservative beliefs and Christian faith. And not that there wasn't, but I didn't feel like there was enough people who were attaching their Christian faith to their conservative beliefs. There was a lot of crazy Republicans and conservatives, and then there was a lot of Christians who never spoke about politics. And I remember how bothered I was by that, about how Christians were not using their voice to speak about, politics or political issues, and that really, really bothered me. So I remember having a conversation with my dad, TikTok specifically. I was like, it's so leftist, it's so liberal, and there's so many people who don't know what they're talking about online. There's not enough Christians who are willing to be vocal enough to use their voice, and it just frustrated me. And so we were sitting down just having this casual conversation. I was just talking about how much I was bothered by that. And he goes, so why don't you do it? Why don't you start posting? Why don't you share your opinion? And I was like, well, I don't know, maybe I could, right? So I started posting online. I started posting about abortion specifically, talking about my pro-life beliefs, and I started to blow up on TikTok. Literally, overnight, I went from 0 followers to 50,000 followers in a day, which was pretty normal on TikTok back in the day then. Now it's kind of hard to grow, but back then it was pretty normal. And there's a lot of people who were agreeing with me, who were saying man, I wish there was more creators who were talking about this kind of stuff. And so I just continued to post, and I post and post. Eventually I made it to 100,000 followers, now 125,000 followers on TikTok. And it's just crazy what God can do when you use your voice to impact other people. And that's kind of what I want to hit today. It's not to inflate myself or to, pat myself on the back. It's to say that you can make a difference no matter how many followers you have, whether you have 0 followers or 1 million followers. Your voice matters, and you can make a difference. And we can even tag this to the Bible, right? Looking back through all of Scripture, looking at just how the influence and the obedience of one person who God called could make a change, could make a shift. And so to get back into a little bit of my story, come 2021, it had been a year, little less than a year, than I had started posting. I had been messaged by a pro-life organization that I now work for, and they messaged me and said, hey, we love your pro-life posts. We love you talking about this. We'd love for you to come on as a creator and help us with our TikTok. So I did. And I started posting a lot more pro-life content. I started educating myself a lot more, and I would go live on TikTok doing live debates basically. And I think my largest live debate that I had, there was about 10,000 viewers, live viewers, which is a lot on TikTok. And I remember having these conversations with people. And these conversations were not for me to be oh, I'm right and you're wrong. It was genuinely to open up a discussion surrounding abortion, because there is so much stigma around abortion for both sides. Because there's the Christians who are really aggressive about being anti-abortion, and then there's people who are super pro-abortion, and they just cannot see eye to eye. And so I felt that it was important to bring compassion into the conversation and really open up, having deep conversation about it that wasn't just that's murder, you're a murderer, that kind of thing that a lot of Christians do. I was I'm not going to be that kind of person. I want to have true, deep, meaningful conversations that change hearts and change minds. And so I started to do that. And from that point, I was getting hundreds of messages saying like, hey, you know, I was thinking about abortion, I changed my mind, or I used to be pro-choice and now I'm pro-life. And that's what I do this for, is literally for the people, is to reach people. It's not about how many followers I have. It's not about anything like that. It's all for the glory of God and for hearts and minds to change. And that is so important to keep sight of that. And it can be so easy when you start to gain followers to get in this mindset of, how can I gain more followers? How can I get more views? But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's about how many seeds am I planting? How many souls am I bringing to Christ? How many souls am I trying to reach through this message? How many lives am I trying to save? And so that's something I've had to keep mind on, because it's easy to get distracted by numbers. It's easy to get distracted by views. But at the end of the day, ultimately, all of that's going to go away when you die. But the impact that you leave on other people can change their life forever. And so I started to get all these messages and people sending me pictures of their babies and stuff about how their baby was saved from abortion. I think that's so beautiful and amazing. And you know, just my obedience and just my dad mentioning to me, hey, you know, you should be the one doing this. Don't wait on somebody else to do it. You should do it. And I want to give this as a message to you, that if you're looking for a sign, this is your sign, is that if you feel like God is giving you a vision, if you think God has spoken to you about something, why don't you do it? Stop waiting on other people to preach the gospel. Stop waiting on other people to call out injustice. Speak up on it for yourself. Be the person who steps out and is bold. It will get ugly. You're going to have haters. You're going to have people who don't like it. But ultimately, obedience to Christ, obedience to God is something that matters the most. And I want to get into just the power of your voice, the power that one person, the effect of one person's voice, and how it could make a difference for generations. I mean, look at the Bible, right? I'm going to go back to my notes, not because I don't know what I'm talking about, but just so I can stay on point here. So in the story of Esther, it's kind of a long story, and I encourage you to go read the story if you don't know it. But in Esther, it's about this woman who, she's married the king, and basically, just to kind of sum the story up, I'm trying not to get into too much detail. Someone had an agenda against her people, and were trying to kill her people. And so she goes to the king, and even though she could have died because she went to the king unannounced, she ended up saving her people, right? If she would have shied away from what God is telling her to do to save her people, a bunch of people could have died, right? One person standing for truth can make a difference, right? God made you for such a time as this. Your voice matters. Whatever you say, how you reflect God's character, it matters. It can change a life. And if all it does is change one person's heart, then that's what it's all for. It doesn't matter if you reach 1 million people or you reach one person. That's what God sees, is he sees your obedience and your willingness to follow what he is telling you to do. So many believers, we like to stay silent because we have fear of being canceled or, you know, labeled, right? I've had that before. I've had so many videos of people making fun of me go viral online, and I've chosen not to let that bother me. And it doesn't bother me. I've gotten to the point where I don't care, because it doesn't matter what other people say. My videos are getting pushed out, right? Even though they're being hated on, they're still being pushed out, and that message can reach one person, right? That message can change one person's heart. It doesn't matter if I'm canceled or labeled. It doesn't matter what people say about me or how they hate on me. My obedience is first to Christ. It's not to anybody else. It's not to appeal to other people. It's not appeal to make people like me. It is for Christ, obedience to Christ, and to reach people next. And even if God hasn't called you to speak on a large scale, there's still other things that you're needed for. God can use your voice in your prayer room. You could be obedient and start a prayer room and pray over people, pray over our government, pray over our pastors, pray over our country and our nation, because that's something that's so needed. It's not just about being online, it's about using your voice in the way that God has called you to use your voice. It may be speaking in front of thousands of people, or maybe it's starting a Bible study in your hometown with 5 people. Maybe it's going online and sharing to a large audience, or maybe it's sitting on your knees in your closet and praying to the Lord and praying for restoration, praying for healing, praying for our nation. Maybe that's what God's calling you to do. So this is not black and white for everyone. You may not be called to speak online, but you may be called for in the quiet moments to pray, to speak over people, to start a Bible study, to be in your church, to serve in children's ministry. Whatever that is, use that. Use what God has called you to do to make a difference. When we hide the truth, our culture loses its moral compass. We see this, a cultural decline when Christianity isn't something that is being spoken, right? We see Bibles get taken out of school and school goes downhill. We see Christ being taken out of our country and our country goes downhill. Whenever Christ is removed from the picture, everything gets worse. You don't need a big platform. You can make an influence in your family, in your church, in your workplace, or social media. Anything is your mission field. Whatever God has given you, that can be your mission field. It could be speaking to someone who makes your coffee every morning and just saying Jesus loves you, or saying, hey, I just saw that you looked down today. Can I pray for you? Being the person who steps out and is bold. It could be paying for the person behind you's coffee. I've done that so many times. Just to bless someone. I don't have to say anything to them. I don't even have to be like talking about it. It's just saying, I'm going to be obedient to Christ, and I'm just going to pay for this person and just bless their day, right? Being a light that shines in the darkness, standing out. And I've had to correct myself so many times when I'm grumpy in public. Is like, I may be the only Bible that someone ever reads. They may never open a physical Bible, but did they see the love of Jesus radiating off of me? Did they experience God's love just from having a conversation with me? That's something that humbles me so bad, because sometimes I'll be grumpy and like up in my feelings and in a mood, and I'm in a public place, and I just have to remind myself, like, I want to reflect Jesus in everything I do. And so sometimes that is ministry. That is ministry. God can use anything. And that's my encouragement for you today, is don't be shy. Be bold in what God's called you to do, because you never know how far he can take one planted seed. God can take a tiny little seed and he can turn it into an entire harvest, because that's the God that we serve. He's amazing. And I just want to encourage you, because I really feel like someone needs to hear this. And this wasn't even the whole purpose of my podcast today. I didn't even want to get on this whole tangent. I had a lot more to talk about, but I'm going to end soon. But God can use the tiniest bit of obedience to spark a change. It's just like a ripple making a tsunami. God can do that. He can use a ripple to make a tsunami. He can use a tiny little seed and grow an entire ginormous tree that produces so much fruit. And so I want to encourage you that if you've been scared, but you feel like God is calling you to something, to be obedient, because obedience brings blessings. It really does. When you're obedient to God, even though it may not be easy, you might get hated on, you might have people send you death threats, even though that's not easy. It's never going to be easy. You know that you have Jesus walking through it with you. Don't do things for the world, do things for him. And so this wasn't even the whole point of my podcast. I wasn't even trying to get on this tangent, but I feel like that's something that I really wanted to share. And God is going to do amazing things through you if you just step forward and say yes to what he's calling you to do. Instead of being shy, instead of running away from God's calling for your life, say yes to him, because it can bring so much fruit. It can bring so much. And I'm so passionate about this because I've seen the blessings in my life because of my obedience to Christ, because I chose to say, you know what, even though I'm getting all these threats, I'm going to continue to share the gospel. I'm going to continue to share my pro-life beliefs. I'm going to continue to share, the importance of following Christ. I've seen the blessings. I've seen the fruit that's come from that. Has it been easy? No, it has not been easy. I've shed many tears. I've had sleepless nights where I've felt terrible, right? But ultimately, I knew that this is exactly what God called me to do, and that's why I do it. It's exactly why I do it. But anyways, that's really all I have for my podcast episode today. Is just your voice matters. One person can make a difference. You can make a difference. God wants to use you to make a difference. And subscribe to my YouTube channel or subscribe to my podcast wherever you're watching, so I can make more episodes of this podcast. I'm going to be getting into so much about culture, about faith, about my beliefs, about politics, about some of the little niche things I'm passionate about, and I'm excited to share this with you, share a little bit more of myself with you. This is the Live It Loud podcast. My name is Maya. I really appreciate you guys for clicking on this video. It's a new year, new fresh start for me, new fresh start for you. It is 2026 is a year of obedience. 2026 is a year of saying yes to God. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.